Hey, welcome to the channel. Let's explore what the book has to offer. Oh, and keep an eye out for small notes that will pop up on your screen at regular intervals, perfect for quick takeaways and jotting down some life-changing insights. So, let's jump right in and see what this book can teach us.
Okay, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a really cool book I just read called Don't Believe Everything You Think.
Sounds intriguing already.
It is. And the author is Joseph Nguyen, and he's got some really thought-provoking ideas about how to find more peace and joy in our lives, which I think we could all use a little more of, right?
Absolutely.
I have to admit, when I first started reading this book, the intro just totally hit me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, we were just bombarded with all this self-improvement advice all the time.
Right.
But so many of us still feel kind of lost,
For sure. It's like, we have all the ingredients, but no recipe.
Exactly. We are in this grocery store with aisles and aisles of ingredients, but we don't know how to put them together to actually create inner peace.
Makes sense. So how does this book tackle that?
Well, it goes beyond those surface level solutions, it doesn't just tell you to think positive or whatever.
I mean, I feel like we've all heard that advice a million times. Does it actually work?
That's the thing. That's what I thought too. But the book actually says it's not about forcing positive thoughts.
Really? That's interesting.
Right. I was surprised too. But are you ready for a real head scratcher?
Hit me with it.
Okay. So Nguyen points out this idea that two people can be in the exact same situation, literally the same circumstances.
Okay.
But they can have totally different experiences.
Okay. I'm curious, how does he explain that?
Well, he uses this example, imagine you were in a busy coffee shop.
Okay. Yeah, I can picture it.
So, the espresso machine's going, there's people talking, and maybe some music's playing.
Yeah.
One person might be thinking, ugh, this noise is driving me crazy. I can't focus. I'm going to be late.
Right. I can totally see that.
They're tense, their heart's racing.
The thought-o-meter is off the chart.
Exactly. But then another person in that same coffee shop might be thinking, oh, this is great. This energy is what I need to get my creative juices flowing.
Interesting. So two completely different reactions to the same environment. Exactly.
So what's the difference? What's going on there?
It all comes down to our thinking. Our feelings aren't actually caused by what's happening around us, but by our thoughts about what's happening.
Okay, I can see that, but I feel like my brain immediately goes to, well, if my boss is yelling at me, of course I'm going to be upset.
Right, that's what I thought too. So I asked myself, well, if external events automatically cause specific feelings, wouldn't everyone react the same way to everything?
Right.
If your boss yells at you, wouldn't everyone in the office be equally upset?
Okay, that's a good point.
But clearly, that's not how it works. Some people can thrive under pressure, while others, totally crumble.
Right, so it's not the pressure itself, but our interpretation of it.
Exactly. And that's a core concept in the book. Nguyen says it's not actually our thoughts themselves that cause suffering. It's what he calls thinking.
Thinking.
Yeah, it's the act of engaging with those thoughts, judging them, spinning stories around them. Okay, so it's the difference between having the thought, I wish I made more money, and then spiraling into this whole anxiety fest about, I'm never going to be able to afford a house, and what am I even doing with my life?
Exactly. It's that spiral. It's the difference between noticing a thought, oh, there's that thought again, and letting it float on by, versus grabbing onto it and letting it take us down the rabbit hole.
So then the key is not necessarily to try and control our thoughts, but how we respond to them.
Yes. That's exactly it.
This is really making me think about how much I get caught up in the stories I tell myself.
Me too. The book has been so eye-opening. I'm seeing all these patterns in my own thinking that I never even noticed before.
So if it's not about forcing positive thoughts, then how do we actually find more peace?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And you know what Nguyen says? He says our natural state is actually one of peace, love, and joy.
Wait, really? If that's true, then why don't we feel that way all the time?
Yeah, that was my question too.
Well, think about babies. Generally speaking, babies are pretty blissful.
Right, true. They're just these little bundles of joy.
Exactly. They haven't developed all the, mental baggage that we adults carry around. They're just present in the moment, full of love.
Okay, so we're all born with this inner peace, but then we somehow lose it along the way.
Right. We get caught up in our thinking and we forget who we truly are.
So how do we get back to that? How do we unlearn all those negative thought patterns and reconnect with that inner peace?
Well, one of the concepts Nguyen introduces is this idea of A thoughtometer.
A thoughtometer, what's that?
Yeah, it's basically like a gauge for how much you're thinking. Like how many thoughts are running through your mind per minute. So just think about your own day. When is your thoughtometer going haywire? Like, is it during rush hour or when you're checking emails?
Oh, definitely emails. I can feel my stress levels spike just thinking about my inbox.
Exactly. And that's the point. The higher your thoughtometer reading, the more stress you're likely experiencing. It's not even necessarily the content of our thoughts. It's the sheer volume of them that wears us down.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So the more we are thinking, the further we are from that natural state of peace. It's like we are building this wall between ourselves and that inner peace.
I've never thought of it like that before, but it's true.
So then the goal is to kind of lower our thoughtometer reading, right?
Right. And to do that, we need to understand how our minds work.
And that's where the whole don't believe everything you think part comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Nguyen has this really cool framework for understanding the human experience that he calls the 3 principles.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What are the 3 principles?
So the first principle is called universal mind. Think of it as like the intelligence in all things.
Okay.
It's the force that guides how an acorn grows into a tree or how our bodies heal. It's the energy that connects everything in the universe. Okay, so it's like this underlying intelligence that's always working, even when we're not aware of it.
Exactly.
Then what's the second principle?
So the second one is called universal consciousness. This is our awareness. It's what allows us to experience anything at all. It's like what brings the information from the universal mind to life.
I think I'm starting to get it.
Imagine you are watching a movie, right?
Yeah.
Universal consciousness is like the TV screen. It allows you to see the images.
Okay, I like that analogy. So then universal thought would be the movie itself.
You got it. Universal thought is the raw material of creation. It's the stuff that our awareness, our universal consciousness picks up on and brings to life.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. So these 3 principles are working together all the time.
Yeah.
But when we get caught up in our thinking, we block that flow.
Exactly. We get disconnected from that universal mind, and that's when we start to feel all those negative emotions. We feel separate, alone, and afraid.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But if thinking is the problem, how do we stop doing it? It's not like you can just tell someone to stop thinking, right? It's like saying, stop breathing.
You're totally right. And Nguyen acknowledges that. He says it's not about completely emptying our minds. It's more about minimizing the time we spend actively thinking and judging our thoughts.
Okay, so it's more about like managing our thinking than trying to eliminate it completely.
Exactly. It's like shifting our relationship with our thoughts.
So how do we do that? What are some practical tips for minimizing our thinking?
Well, Nguyen uses this great analogy of a bowl of murky water.
Murky water. Okay, I'm picturing it.
How would you make the water clear?
Well, my first thought is to filter it.
I bet you would. But what if I told you there's a simpler way?
Tell me more.
Just let it settle.
Let it settle.
Yeah, the dirt naturally sinks to the bottom.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
It's the same with our minds. Our natural state is clarity and peace. It's the thinking that muddies the waters.
So instead of trying to force our thoughts away, we just allow them to settle on their own.
Exactly. And that's when the clarity emerges.
Okay, I like that. It feels a lot more effortless than trying to control everything, but doesn't that feel kind of impossible, like to just let go of control like that?
It can definitely feel that way at first. Our minds are so used to being in charge, but that's where the real freedom lies.
I'm sensing a Zen story coming on.
Huh. You know me so well. There's this great Zen story about a young monk who's struggling to meditate.
Okay, I can relate to that already.
Yay. So this monk is constantly getting frustrated by noises and distractions. He even goes out on a boat to the middle of a lake, trying to find some peace and quiet.
Oh, wow, I feel that. My meditation spot is usually just me hiding in the bathroom for 5 minutes.
I hear you. Well, this monk thinks he's finally found the perfect quiet spot, right? But then another boat bumps into his.
Oh, no!
He's furious, but then he realizes the other boat is empty.
Wait, what? So there's no one to be angry at?
Exactly. And that's the point of the story. The monk's anger was coming from his reaction, not the actual event itself.
So the empty boat was like a mirror reflecting his own inner turmoil back to him.
Precisely. And it's a reminder that we often blame external circumstances for our suffering when it's really our own internal reaction that's causing it.
That's deep. Okay, so I'm starting to get this whole non-thinking thing. But I have to admit, a part of me is thinking, if I stop thinking, how will I get anything done?
I think that's a common fear.
Like, will I just become a hermit in the mountains?
I love that image. But seriously, Nguyen addresses this directly in the book. He says, stopping thinking doesn't mean becoming inactive or abandoning our goals. It's about shifting from a state of desperation to a state of inspiration.
Okay, tell me more about that. What's the difference between desperation and inspiration?
So Nguyen argues that there are two sources for our goals and actions. Desperation, which feels heavy, stressful, and like we are constantly chasing something we lack. And then there's inspiration that feels light, joyful, and like we are aligned with our true purpose.
Oh, I like that. So it's like the difference between feeling like we have to do something versus wanting to do it.
Exactly. And here's a clue for identifying goals born from desperation. They often feel like means goals.
Means goals.
Yeah, like we want to achieve them so we can do something else afterward.
Oh, like I want to make $1 million so I can finally be free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The goal is ultimately about escaping our current reality rather than creating something fulfilling in itself.
Oh, wow. I've definitely set goals from that place of I'll be happy when.
Right. And that's the trap. We're always chasing the next thing instead of finding fulfillment in the present moment.
Okay, so how do we shift towards that more inspired state?
This is where the power of non-thinking comes in. Nguyen suggests that when we quiet our minds, we naturally tap into a deeper well of creativity and wisdom.
Okay, I like where this is going.
We start receiving ideas and inspiration that feel aligned with our true selves, not born from fear or lack.
So it's not about forcing inspiration, but creating the space for it to emerge.
Exactly. And that's a key theme throughout the book. It's not about doing more, it's about being more.
This is all making so much sense. But I do have one more question about non-thinking.
Okay, what's that?
What about love? Like, does non-thinking mean becoming emotionally detached?
That's a great question. And Nguyen actually addresses this with a really touching story about his relationship with his girlfriend, McKenna.
Ah, love story. Tell me more.
So being the analytical thinker that he is, Nguyen asks McKenna, "Why do you love me?"
Okay.
And her response is so simple and beautiful. She just says, "I don't know, I just do."
Oh, I love that.
Right. But Nguyen, on the other hand, can rattle off this whole list of reasons why he loves her.
So relatable. I'm definitely the list maker in my relationships.
Well, Nguyen eventually has this realization that if his love for McKenna is based on specific reasons, then it becomes conditional.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, what happens if she stops doing the things he loves? Does his love disappear?
Exactly. And he recognizes the beauty of McKenna's simple statement, "I don't know, I just do." Her love is unconditional. It's not based on any external reasons or conditions.
Wow, that's powerful. It's like she's embodying that pure love that flows from the universal mind without any mental filters.
Precisely. And Nguyen connects this concept of unconditional love to creation. He says that when we create from a place of pure joy and inspiration, without any ulterior motives, we experience that same sense of unconditional flow.
So it's like we are channeling that same universal energy, whether we're creating art or building a business or simply expressing our love for someone.
Exactly. It's about aligning our actions with that deeper source of peace and joy, rather than getting caught up in external expectations or conditions.
Okay, I love this idea of unconditional creation. It's making me wonder, though, what happens when we actually start experiencing more peace and joy in our lives? Like, does it feel, I don't know, weird?
That's such an interesting observation. And you know what? It actually can feel weird. And Nguyen admits that initially it can feel off, or even like we're being lazy because it's so unfamiliar.
It's like our minds are so used to the drama and the stress that peace feels suspicious.
Exactly. But this is normal. It's like we've been living in a noisy room for so long that silence feels strange. But that silence, that peace, is our true home.
So it's about embracing the discomfort of the unfamiliar and trusting that it's leading us somewhere better.
Exactly. And the book really highlights that choice we have. We can cling to the familiar suffering we know, or we can step into the potential of the unknown, even if it feels a little scary at first.
Okay, I'm ready to ditch the drama and embrace the unknown. But before we go too far, I have one more question. What about intuition? Like, how does that fit into all of this?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what Nguyen explores next. He says that intuition is like our inner GPS. It's always guiding us, even when we're not aware of it.
Okay, I love that, our inner GPS. But doesn't it sometimes feel like our societal norms clash with our intuition? Like, we're told to follow a certain path, but our gut is telling us to go in a completely different direction.
All the time. Nguyen points out that societal norms can make it even harder to trust that inner voice.
So it's about reclaiming our power and trusting our own inner compass rather than blindly following external expectations.
Yes. And he shares some fascinating examples of people who followed their seemingly illogical gut feelings and ended up experiencing incredible breakthroughs.
Okay, I'm all about defying societal norms and following my intuition. But sometimes those gut feelings can be so subtle. How do we learn to recognize and trust them?
That's where the power of non-thinking comes in again. And Nguyen argues that when we quiet our minds, we create the space for those intuitive insights to emerge. He uses this classic Zen story to illustrate this. It's called The Teacup and the Scholar.
All right, another Zen story. I'm ready for it.
So in this story, a scholar approaches a Zen master for advice, but he's so full of his own opinions and knowledge that he can't truly listen. The master pours him a cup of tea, but keeps pouring even after the cup overflows.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. The scholar protests, and the master says, exactly, you are like this cup, so full of ideas that nothing more will fit in.
So we need to empty our minds of preconceived notions to make room for new insights.
Precisely. And Nguyen connects this to the process of creating space for miracles.
Miracles, that's a big word.
It is. But he talks about how people like Edison and Einstein used unconventional methods to break through mental blocks.
Oh yeah, I love those stories. They're a great reminder that sometimes the best solutions come when we step away from the problem and allow our minds to wander.
Exactly. And that's what non-thinking allows us to do. It creates the mental space for those aha moments to occur.
Okay, so we've established that non-thinking is key to accessing our intuition. But how do we actually do that? How do we create that space for those, what did you call them, divine downloads?
Divine downloads. I like that. And Nguyen actually offers a really simple 3-step process for receiving them. First, become aware that your thinking is the root cause of any negative emotions you are experiencing.
Okay, so awareness is the first step. What's next?
Second, surrender the need to figure things out with your mind and trust that your inner wisdom will guide you.
Okay, surrender. That's a tough one, but I'm willing to try. What's the third step?
Third, focus on cultivating feelings of peace, love, and joy, which will naturally open you up to intuitive insights.
So it's about shifting from a mindset of, I need to figure this out, to I'm open to receiving guidance.
Exactly. It's about letting go of the mental struggle and creating an internal environment of receptivity.
I love that. It feels so much more freeing than our usual approach of overthinking and stressing.
It is. And remember, even though this process is simple, it's not always easy. We'll inevitably get caught up in our thinking.
Right. Old habits die hard, as they say.
But the key is to keep remembering that our thoughts aren't reality. We have the power to choose how we respond to them.
This has been so insightful. I'm already feeling more inspired to let go of the mental chatter and tap into that deeper well of wisdom within.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, this is just a taste of what Nguyen's book has to offer. There's so much more to explore, and don't believe everything you think. But for now, let's shift gears a bit and dive deeper into the practical applications of these principles.
So we've been talking about some pretty mind-blowing concepts from don't believe everything you think, like this idea that our thinking causes our suffering, not the events themselves.
Right.
And this whole thing about like non-thinking is the key to unlocking all this peace and joy.
And even miracles. Don't forget about the miracle.
Oh yeah, the miracles. I mean, my mind is just buzzing with questions.
I bet. It's a lot to take in.
It is. Like, how do we actually apply this stuff in our daily lives?
That's a real question, isn't it?
It is. And the book talks about creating a non-thinking environment, which sounds really intriguing. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, so Nguyen's idea is that our environment, like our physical surroundings, but also the information we consume, it can either help or hinder our ability to access that peaceful state of mind.
Okay, so it's kind of like setting ourselves up for success.
Exactly. It's being mindful of the things that trigger us, that, send us into that fight or flight mode.
Oh yeah, I know that feeling. Like heart racing, palms sweating.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Not fun at all. That's our body's way of saying, hey, there's a threat here. But so often those threats are not actually life or death situations.
Right. It's like our minds are stuck in overdrive.
Exactly. So part of creating a non-thinking environment is minimizing those triggers.
Okay, so what do we talk about here? Like less caffeine,
right?
Less doom scrolling on social media.
Those are great examples. It's really about being honest with ourselves about what drains our energy and what helps us feel grounded and peaceful.
So it's about adding in more of the good stuff and subtracting some of the not so good stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
But what about the things we can't just eliminate? Like, a stressful job or a relationship that's not serving us.
That's where the real inner work comes in, for sure.
Right, because we can't always control what happens around us.
Exactly. But we can control how we react.
So it's all about managing those reactions.
Yes. And remember that thought-o-meter we talked about?
Yeah, the gauge for how much we are thinking.
Right. By becoming aware of our thoughts and reactions, we can start to shift those thinking patterns, even in those tough situations.
Okay, that's helpful. But do you have any specific frameworks or tools that we can use to actually navigate those tricky situations?
Absolutely. And Nguyen offers a really helpful framework for identifying and overcoming destructive habits.
Ooh, destructive habits. I think we've all got a few of those.
Right. So it all starts with becoming aware of the specific behavior we want to change.
Right.
Let's say, for example, you have a habit of stress eating when you're overwhelmed with work.
Oh, that's me. Guilty as charged. What's next?
Well, the framework encourages you to examine the feeling that's triggering that behavior. So in your stress eating example, the feeling might be anxiety.
Right, anxiety for sure.
Then ask yourself, what thoughts are running through my mind in that moment?
Okay, so with the stress eating example, the thoughts might be something like, I can't handle this, or I'm never going to get all of this done.
Exactly. And then even deeper than the thoughts, what are the underlying beliefs that are fueling this habit?
Okay. So the feeling is anxiety. The thought is, I can't handle this. And the belief might be something like, I'm not good enough.
Precisely. By bringing those underlying thoughts and beliefs to the surface, we can start to question their validity.
Oh, that's a good point. Are those beliefs actually true? Or are they just old stories we've been telling ourselves?
Exactly.
I love that. It's like shining a light on those subconscious patterns that are driving our behavior.
Yes. And once those patterns are brought to light, we have a choice.
A choice to change them.
Exactly. The next step is to replace those limiting beliefs with more empowering ones.
Okay, so instead of I'm not good enough, you might choose to believe I am capable and resourceful, or I am doing my best.
Exactly. That's where that inner wisdom we talked about earlier comes in.
Right, so it's about tapping into that intuitive guidance and trusting that we have the answers within.
Yes. And Nguyen suggests asking yourself, what is my inner wisdom trying to tell me? How is it trying to help me grow right now?
I like that. It's like we're having a direct line to our own personal Yoda. Trust your feelings, you must.
Ha! Exactly. And that's where the real transformation happens. When we connect to that inner wisdom, we start to see solutions and possibilities that we couldn't have imagined from our limited analytical minds.
This is so inspiring. It's like we're being invited to step into a whole new way of operating in the world, one that's grounded in peace, intuition, and trust.
Yes. And it all starts with creating that non-thinking space within ourselves.
Okay, I'm on board with creating that space. But how? Where do we even begin?
Well, the book actually gives some great tips for actually getting into that non-thinking state. One of my favorites is creating an activation ritual.
An activation ritual. Tell me more. I'm all about optimizing my morning routine.
Perfect. It's essentially about setting yourself up for peace and clarity from the moment you wake up. Think about incorporating practices that help you connect to your inner wisdom.
Okay, so things like meditation, journaling, maybe some time in nature.
Those are all great examples, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be as simple as sitting quietly with a cup of tea before you check your phone, whatever helps you tap into that stillness.
So it's about creating a buffer between waking up and getting sucked into the demands of the day.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing that connection to ourselves before we get bombarded with external distractions.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like we're setting the tone for our whole day by starting with intention and presence.
Right. And the more we do that, the easier it becomes to access that peace throughout the day.
So it becomes a habit, like brushing our teeth.
Exactly. But what about those times when we inevitably get pulled back into the mental whirlwind? You know, life throws us curveballs, deadlines loom, relationships get messy. How do we maintain that sense of peace when things feel chaotic?
Yeah, that's the real challenge, isn't it? Like, how do we stay centered when everything around us feels like it's spinning out of control?
It's not easy, that's for sure, but it is possible. And there's this idea from the book that I think is so helpful in those moments. It's called allowing.
Allowing. Okay, tell me more.
It's a simple concept, but really powerful. Nguyen reminds us that we can't always control what happens, but we can always control how we respond.
I think I'm sensing a Zen story coming on. Am I right?
You know me too well. It's not really a traditional Zen story, but it has that same thought-provoking quality. So there's this tough, brawny samurai who approaches a Zen master and demands to know the nature of heaven and hell.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The Zen master, instead of answering, just starts insulting the samurai relentlessly.
Oh, wow, that's harsh.
Right, pushing the samurai to the brink of rage.
I can feel the tension building already.
And just as the samurai is about to strike the master down, the master calmly says, "That's hell."
Whoa. Okay, so the samurai's rage, that was hell.
Exactly. And then the master continues, and this, he gestures to his own calm demeanor, this is heaven.
So our reactions are what create our experience of heaven or hell.
Precisely. And that's what allowing is all about. It's about letting our emotions be present without judgment or resistance.
Because when we fight against those negative emotions, we actually make them stronger.
Exactly. It's like that saying, what we resist persists.
Right. So we're not trying to suppress our emotions, but we're also not letting them control us.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance. Think of it like quicksand. When we struggle in quicksand, we sink deeper. But if we relax and allow our bodies to float, we naturally rise to the surface.
So we're essentially surrendering to the experience, trusting that it will pass rather than fighting against it.
Yes. And this applies to our thoughts too. When we try to force our thoughts away, they just come back stronger. But when we simply observe them without judgment, they lose their power over us.
This is such a radical shift from our usual approach of trying to control everything. It's like we are being invited to embrace a more gentle, accepting way of being in the world.
It is. And it doesn't mean we become passive or give up on our goals. It's about aligning ourselves with a deeper source of power and allowing that wisdom to guide us.
Okay, I'm definitely on board with tapping into that deeper wisdom. But I have a confession to make. I'm a planner. I like to have things figured out. This whole trusting the unknown thing feels a little, well, unknown.
I understand. Our minds are wired to seek certainty and control. But, as Nguyen points out, the path often unfolds as we walk it. We don't need to have all the answers up front.
So it's more about taking inspired action and trusting that the details will work themselves out.
Exactly. He uses this great analogy of a GPS system.
Okay.
We plug in our destination, but we don't need to know every turn or detour along the way.
Right. We trust the GPS to guide us.
Exactly.
That's a great analogy. It's like we are setting the intention and then allowing the universe to handle the logistics.
Precisely. And the book points out that this approach can actually lead to more fulfilling outcomes than our usual method of trying to control every little detail.
Okay, I'm starting to see the magic in this. But I have to admit, I still have a few doubts. What if our intuition leads us astray? What if we make the wrong decision?
That's where Nguyen's perspective on right and wrong becomes really helpful. He says, there are no inherently wrong decisions, only choices that lead to more or less pleasant experiences.
So it's not about finding the perfect path, but rather learning and growing from each experience.
Exactly. And remember, even if we make a choice that doesn't lead to the outcome we desired, it's still a valuable learning opportunity. It's feedback. It's helping us refine our inner compass.
This is so liberating. It takes the pressure off of having to be right all the time. But I think a lot of people struggle with trusting their intuition because it often goes against what society tells us we should do.
That's so true. Nguyen acknowledges that societal norms often clash with our intuition, making it even harder to trust that inner voice. He encourages us to have the courage to follow our hearts, even when it feels unconventional.
So it's about reclaiming our power and trusting our own inner compass rather than blindly following external expectations.
Exactly. And he shares some inspiring examples of people who defied societal norms and achieved incredible things by following their intuition.
Okay, I'm feeling fired up to break free from the shoulds and embrace my own unique path. But what about those times when our intuition feels silent? Like, what if we're facing a challenging situation and we just don't know what to do?
That's a really common experience. And then Nguyen reminds us that we already have all the wisdom we need within.
We do. But what if we just can't hear it?
He says that if we are not sure what to do, it's often because fear or self-doubt is blocking our access to that inner guidance.
So it's like we are standing in front of a door, but we're too afraid to open it.
Exactly. And he offers some powerful reminders for overcoming those mental blocks. He quotes Henry Ford, who said, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right."
Oh, wow. That's a classic for a reason.
Yeah,
Our beliefs really do shape our reality.
they do. And Nguyen emphasizes the importance of believing in our ability to access the answers we need, even when we don't have them yet.
So it's about shifting from a mindset of, I don't know, to I can know.
Precisely. It's about trusting that the wisdom is there and that we can tap into it when we need it.
I love that. It feels so much more empowering than our usual approach of stressing and overthinking. This has been such a mind-expanding deep dive. I'm already feeling more inspired to let go of the mental chatter and trust my intuition.
That's great to hear. And remember, this is just a taste of what Nguyen's book has to offer. There's so much more to explore in Don't Believe Everything You Think.
For sure. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding the root cause of suffering to tapping into our intuition and creating a more peaceful environment. It's clear this book is packed with wisdom and practical tools to transform our lives.
It is. And I think the biggest takeaway is that non-thinking isn't about becoming passive or giving up.
Right.
It's about connecting to a deeper source of wisdom and power within ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And I have a feeling our listeners are eager to hear what final gems of wisdom we uncover in the last part of our deep dive. All right, so we are back and we are wrapping up our deep dive into Don't Believe Everything You Think.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, it really has. And I feel like we've just scratched the surface of all the wisdom in this book.
I know, right? There's so much to unpack here.
There is. It's like every page is filled with these little nuggets of like aha moments.
Yeah, totally agree. It's definitely one of those books that I feel like you could read again and again and still find new insights.
For sure. And I have to say, personally, I'm already starting to see how my own thoughts have been like creating so much unnecessary drama in my life.
In what ways?
Well, just like little things, you know, like getting caught up in worrying about what other people think or overthinking every decision or letting those negative thoughts spiral out of control.
Yeah, I think we all do that to some extent. It's like our default setting.
Right. But I'm ready to trade in all that drama for a little more peace and joy.
And that's the beauty of these principles, right? They are simple, but they're so powerful.
They really are. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are like some key takeaways that our listeners can walk away with?
Well, let's start with the foundation that we've been exploring this whole time.
Okay.
Our thinking, not the events themselves, is the root cause of our suffering.
It's such a huge realization, though, when you think about it. Like, it means we have so much more power than we realize.
We do. We're not victims of our circumstances.
Exactly. If our thoughts are creating our reality, then we can choose to think differently.
Yes. And when we change our thinking, we change our experience.
We can create a more peaceful and joyful reality.
Exactly. And another key takeaway is that our natural state, like we talked about earlier, it's one of peace, love, and joy. It's the thinking that pulls us away from that.
So it's not about becoming someone new, but like remembering who we already are deep down.
Exactly. And the book gives us some really practical steps to help us do that.
Right. Like minimizing our thinking, creating that non-thinking environment, trusting our intuition.
Aligning our actions with inspiration rather than desperation.
And of course, remembering that there are no wrong decisions.
Just different experiences.
What a freeing thought. It takes all the pressure off, doesn't it?
It does. And I think one of the most important things we've discussed is this idea of surrender.
Surrender. Yeah, that's a big one. But it's also like kind of scary.
It can be. It's about trusting a power greater than ourselves, whether we call that the universe, God, our own inner wisdom.
It's about letting go of the need to control everything and trusting that we're being guided even when we can't see the whole path.
Beautifully said. And I think that really captures the essence of what Nguyen is sharing in Don't Believe Everything You Think.
This has been such a mind-expanding deep dive. I'm already feeling so much more inspired to just let go of all that mental chatter and tap into that inner wisdom we've been talking about.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, this is just a glimpse into the depth of this book.
Yeah, it's definitely a book that deserves to be read and reread.
For sure. And as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay, hit me with it.
If suffering comes from thinking, what would your life look like if you chose to simply let go?
That's a powerful question to ponder. It really challenges us to consider all the possibilities, you know?
It does. And who knows what miracles might be waiting for us on the other side.
That's a great point. So much of what's holding us back is just like our own minds.
It's true. And this book is such a beautiful reminder that we have the power to break free.
So true. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey of self-discovery. And until next time, keep diving deep and trusting your inner wisdom.
Kindly head down to description and click the link to purchase the book.
Thank you for listening to us. Please kindly like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, please let us know which book you would like us to summarize.